That's good. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, how you doing, Patrick?
How you doing? Good. Thanks for joining us. I'm, as I said several times already, I'm Patrick O'Halloran. I'm the product marketing manager for Wearscape, and we're joined by Kevin Marshbank. I appreciate you all signing up for this webinar. We went through a rehearsal yesterday. I think it looks really, really good, and I'm excited to get started. So let's do my spiel for Wearscape, and then we'll get you to what you came here to see. So let me talk a little bit about what Wearscape is, what we do, what we offer. Wearscape as a company has been around about 20 years. We started as a software consulting company. And we were doing consulting projects, building data warehouses. And realized that we were doing a lot of repetitive tasks. So what happened was we started building tools to automate that, do a lot of the mundane repetitive tasks and automate them from metadata and from scripts and templates. And those tools became very, very, very effective. So effective that a couple of customers asked us, how are you turning out these data projects so quickly? And they wanted to buy those products. So at that point, Wearscape stopped being a consulting company and started being a software company. Primarily focused around data warehouses or data lakes, data lakehouses, data marts, data vaults, data projects, large, big data projects. We have about 1,200 customers worldwide. We're not focused in any geographic region or any particular industry. We've got customers that are in finance and government, in manufacturing, in healthcare, just all over the world. And the big thing we do is, as I said, we call it data warehouse automation, but any kind of large data project. And we'll talk a bit about the benefits of automation. So why automate? Cost, risk, complexity, urgency, agility. Cost is obvious to some extent and a little less obvious to another extent. Obviously, the cost of being able to develop something faster means less labor cost, but also the lost cost of projects taking too long. If it's going to take 6 months, 9 months, 12 months to have a usable product that you're going to give to the business analyst, there's a cost there of that time. Data automation allows you to deliver and develop things much, much, much faster. We say days and weeks instead of months and years. So the business analysts get the information they need. The business leaders, organizational leaders get the information they need to make decisions, and they really reap the benefits of that. Risk, there's lots of kinds of risk involved. It could be new technologies, could be new methodologies, could be turnover. Maybe you've got all this information stuck in someone's head, or maybe you brought a consultant in to help you develop something and they've left. A lot of information goes away with them. The risk of completing a project, the risk of maintaining a project, all that's mitigated through automation, because we're capturing not just how you want to do something, but what you're doing. Complexity, whether it's data vault, as we're going to talk about, data lakehouses, new technologies, web APIs, merging multiple systems through acquisitions and mergers. There's a lot of complexity there. The idea of automation is that a lot of the mechanics of how do I typecast variables, how do I convert Oracle variables into Snowflake variables, those are all handled automatically. A lot of that complexity goes away. Urgency, you'll see through Kevin's demos that you can quickly, rapidly prototype right in front of an analyst. I can add transforms. I can make changes to a dev system or a sandbox system, and they can use their tools to see what I'm doing. And that kind of leads into agility too. I can rapidly prototype right in front of someone, a data analyst. They can use Tableau, Power BI, Yellowfin, whatever tools they always use. And as I make changes, they can see those changes. And because a lot of times you go to as an IT person, you go to the analyst and say, what do you want? And their response is almost always, well, what have you got? So what really helps is this prototyping, rapid prototyping, incremental steps, getting things out quickly, having some quick wins, and being able to deliver a much, much more usable product that really helps the analyst and helps the business. So I briefly talked about this. You'll see it in action. I'm really been looking forward to this. Faster, happier end users, reduced costs, greater consistency. Obviously, with hand-coded stuff, and you've got 6 different people developing things, you've got 6 different styles. With automation, it's maintenance and refactoring is much, much, much easier. And documentation. Because we're capturing the metadata, we can generate with about 3 or 4 mouse clicks complete and full documentation on an entire system, whether it's the dev system, QA system, production system. Someone adds a star schema today, tomorrow morning, or even later today, we can regenerate the documentation, and all that's available to the end user. We did have one question pop up already. Will the slide deck be made available to the attendees? Yes. So you're going to get a follow-up email, and we'll be sending you the slide deck. I'll also point out that there is a Q&A button on your Zoom controls. Feel free to type in questions. If it's appropriate, we'll answer them when they show up. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end. With that, I will stop sharing my screen, and we will get to Kevin's presentation. Kevin?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Patrick. That was great, and great tie-in. I'll go ahead and swap over here, and you should see that. All right. So yeah, you're here talking about avoiding the pitfalls of implementing Data Vault 2.0, and I'll be peppering in some stories from the real world from over a decade of implementing data vaults. And we will go ahead and jump in. If you, I've probably met many of you. I haven't looked at the participant list yet, but if you haven't met you before, welcome. Good to talk with you. And hopefully this will be very beneficial as we go through this. So a little background on myself, president and principal solution architect at the Data Vault shop, and been building data warehouses for over 20 years, data vaults for over 10 years, back when Dan Lindstedt had just posted 4 articles on tdan.com. I'll talk a little bit about that experience, and also experiences since then. Also was a Wordscape employee for a while, and have moved back into consulting, and deal exclusively in helping customers build data vaults, data warehouses, and exclusively with Wordscape tools. And hopefully we'll demonstrate that as we go through as well. But let me go ahead and swap off here video so we can focus on just the presentation. So some of the things that, some of the platforms that I've implemented Data Vault 2.0 on, SQL Server, every flavor that you can think of, Enterprise Edition, Standard Edition, Parallel Data Warehouse, which has been turned into Azure Synapse in the cloud, Azure SQL. I've implemented on Oracle, including Exadata, Redshift, Teradata, Snowflake, Azure Synapse, Hadoop, DB2. Yes, I've built data vaults on all of these, and started playing around. I've built some stuff into Databricks, but I wouldn't call them actually a deployment of a data vault yet, simply because I've been with a real world customer data at this point. But the reason I've been able to do this on so many platforms realistically is because I'm using Wordscape to do this, and it's the tool that lets you build on all of these platforms. So let's jump into the agenda. We're going to cover 5 myths with implementing Data Vault 2.0 and kind of go through those in a bit of detail. Things that I've heard over time, resistance to the implementing, things people have heard, you may have even seen things posted. We'll cover architecture, why it's important to build your raw vault correctly from the beginning. We'll kind of demonstrate some of that as well. And then we will get into team skills, what's important for the team that you organize around putting or starting your Data Vault 2.0 project, or continuing, whether it's greenfield or adding on. So how do you bring new people in? What should you consider, etc. And then tools. We'll talk through what are the tools that you need to implement correctly, and what's involved there, from free to well, nothing's ever free. So time is involved, and which tools are going to give you the best ROI for that. So, and then resistance to change. So how do you overcome resistance to change in your organization, whether that's the engineers, the business, etc. So we'll go through a series of those as well. So first, the top 5 myths about Data Vault 2.0. The first one that I've heard, and it really is kind of dying down a bit, but the myth one is not relevant nor necessary. I've heard people say, oh, it's just a hub and spoke, or they come up with other various things. And this depends on people's familiarity in the data warehousing industry over time. So one of the things definitely it's becoming much more important. It's becoming increasingly necessary, bordering on absolutely necessary. And the reason for that really is the increase in data volumes. And I've got a link down there at the bottom to Kent Graziano's True Data Ops podcast. Neil Strange said this on episode 15 they did during the WWDC 2023. Something that Neil brought up is the reason that Data Vault is becoming more popular is because more and more organizations are dealing with larger volumes of data. What you'll probably see is those of us who have been doing Data Vault for 10 years or so have been doing Data Vault because we were involved in large data implementations, data warehouses earlier on, and we needed something that could scale. And this is happening across the board worldwide, a general increase in data volume. Commodity data really is the data that you can consume, whether you're pulling it from CDC, NIHS, geographic data, demographic data, weather data. There's a whole bunch of commodity data out there that organizations can take advantage of, and they can integrate that into their enterprise data. Enterprise data is that data that you're producing internally from your customers, orders, and your business activities, whatever those are. And so this grand increase in data volume really has made Data Vault 2.0 more attractive, not only to the practitioners, data warehouse practitioners, people building these warehouses based off of the business requests, but also the business leaders are starting to hear a lot more about it because people are having success in these larger implementations. From 2020 to 2022, enterprise data volume, so again, that's the data that enterprises are producing internally, worldwide has increased from 1 petabyte to 2.02 petabytes. That's a 44% annual growth rate. So, the question I would have to you as a participant, what have you been doing with your data internally in those 2 years while the data volume has increased to that large of a scale? Are you able to adapt and consume that data in an integrated fashion that's well-formed that can be presented to the business? Again, we'll cover those as well. Globally, total data created, copied, and consumed is expected to grow from 64 zettabytes in 2020 to 180 zettabytes in 2025. That's an incredible amount of data. That's almost 300% growth rate. Now, that doesn't mean that's all being used. In fact, I saw another stat, I didn't put it in here, but most of this data is actually being discarded because businesses are not able to actually consume and use it because of the volume that's being produced. And the more that you can take advantage of that, the greater advantage your organization is going to have. One of the things I like to tell people is that everybody's got access to commodity data. The enterprise data, that data that you have about your relationship with your customers, about your business operations, that data you're producing, that's your IP. That's the strategic advantage that your organization has against its competitors. So you need to be able to definitely take advantage of that. You also need to be consuming commodity data and integrating that because everybody's taking advantage of that kind of information to help run through AI, run through predictive algorithms, and just help understand the events and activities and behaviors of customers and the general operation of the business. What built for scale? So Data Vault 2.0, I'm sure you've heard this before if you looked into Data Vault 2.0 at all, but it is definitely built for scale. And from a real world example, the first Data Vault that I created with the 12 to 13 person team, without any automation, we built it on SQL Server, on Iron, on-premise, 20 terabyte SQL Server implementation, multi-tenant from Asia Pacific data integrated with North America data, and it scaled and it performed very well with many customers hitting in reports for the particular organizations on a multi-tenant warehouse, a Data Vault warehouse. So definitely scales. That's a 10-year-old data warehouse that really served the business and our customers well. This is a link to a post from Wayne Eckerson up in there, right? So when you get the deck, you can click on that link. That'll bring you to his LinkedIn post. just talking about the adoption of Data Vault and how that's increased. In his article, he mentions that it's not as popular as other methodologies like star schema and third normal form yet. One thing I really want to point out is that those are not at odds with each other. Almost always you will be putting a star schema or a data science focused infomart on the end of Data Vault. Data Vault's that integration layer that gives you the single version of the truth with historical data captured and produced at scale so that you can go reprocess data over time. But you're usually going to put that in a star schema for reporting purposes, which we'll cover again later. So again, it's that integration layer at scale. So a few other links in there for some of this data that's on this slide that you can look at later. So myth number 2, too complex or difficult to learn. I have heard this. I've actually worked with people that have tried to use that as a crutch, and really it's not the case. Data Vault 2.0 is a set of simple and consistent rules. There is a set of standards that you can go and refer to, datavaultalliance.com, and you can easily learn and apply those. It has a well-defined methodology and will bring you through the project from end to end. And as long as you stick with the standards, you're going to be well on your way. There is a really basic set of terms to get going. You have heard of many of these: hub, satellite, link, bridge, PIT, hash key, answer only. That's really your basic set of terms that you need to know. Of course, there's variations and minutia that can come into that based off of the implementation, but you can get going with that and start producing well. Again, the team that I had, we started with just 4 articles that Dan Linstead had posted, and were able to produce a well-formed Data Vault that was very successful. You can refer to datavaultalliance.com, go to the forums there. A lot of the authorized training partners are on there. A lot of people are on there providing feedback. Data Vault experts have been doing this for a decade or more. I'm happy to help. There is CDVP2 training, and there's 2.1 training coming out soon. That was announced at the Data Vault Consortium this year. So there's authorized trainers to go through that. Definitely worthwhile. Lots of blogs. I didn't bother linking, but you can easily find those. LinkedIn articles, lots of people that contribute to the community. Automation tools. So again, obviously, if you're going to be taking on Data Vault, one of the things I love about using Wearescape for implementing Data Vault within an organization is that it actually teaches you how to build Data Vault well. It's going to help you focus on, and you'll see this in some of the demonstrations, it will help you focus on that business model and then generate the proper raw vault from there. So you can see what should be produced from that type of a model. So real world example, again, I was brought in as a data warehouse architect for a greenfield warehouse to replace an existing one. I came in and looked at, many of you may have come in and looked at a warehouse, what it's claimed to be a warehouse, and it's not really a data warehouse. I was given 12 software engineers and QA engineers with little to no data warehouse experience. We went through a rudimentary Data Vault training, data warehouse training, and then we read the 4 articles and we were able to produce that Data Vault. And again, very successfully. So definitely possible, and it is not a difficult exercise. Difficult to query, myth number 3. So this usually comes from not understanding where the raw vault, I mean, typically they're talking specifically about the raw vault, and I won't get into all the delineations here, but Data Vault 2.0 is not meant to be a reporting layer. It's an integration layer that provides that single version of the truth at scale for the enterprise. And that integration layer is super important. But you should never be sending your report developers, your data analysts to the raw vault directly. There should be a layer that you're providing that helps you pull that data out. So there are standard patterns for querying that data from the raw vault. For instance, with Wearescape, we automatically build a view layer that gets you your current data out of the satellites, as well as PIT tables, point time tables, and bridge tables are built within the tool set that provides that simplification of querying that data out. And that's incredibly important. Dan Linstead would call this a best practice. That's not necessarily a point in time. PIT and bridge tables are part of the standard. Satellite view layer to get your standardized getting your current data out of the raw vault is not necessarily part of the standard, but he calls it a best practice. So I've walked through that with him with what we produce out of automatically out of the tool set. The business vault layer, it's incredibly important to simplify that data retrieval, also to enshrine those enterprise business rules. And part of that standard for data vault is that you only implement hard business rules as you load data into the data vault, the raw vault, because that data should be unmolested. It should be that raw data that you can track back to what it was in the source system. And you implement soft business rules after the raw vault into the business vault. When you're going into the business vault, those are going to be more enterprise rules. And then as you work towards your star schema, your dimensions, your facts, and then out into your reports, the rules become softer and softer because they become more specific to those particular use cases. But in the business vault, you should be implementing enterprise rules such as your definition of revenue. So real world example, I came in as an architect to an organization that had 600 crystal reports. And throughout all those, we had about 6 different definitions of revenue that were off by over $100,000 in between them, which really didn't matter too much to the company when it was going really well. But then when the recession hit, all of a sudden $100,000 between revenue definitions made a big difference. So these things are incredibly important. What I like to tell people is that as your business analysts build their business rules into reports, once they become important and are actually being used by the business, they should be brought back into your business vault layer and produced as an enterprise rule that everybody can take advantage of. And that way you don't have these rules being recreated potentially differently in your different reporting layers. Reporting analytical teams usually are going to access a star schema or an analytically focused format. So flat and wide, like maybe either analysis services in tabular format or multi-dimensional format or a star schema, or just big flat wide tables for data scientists to pull into their models. So that's typically where that access is going to be done at, not further upstream. There are exceptions to that, but those really should be exceptions. And this is a typical, not a prescription, but just kind of a typical data flow pattern. Lots of variations that happen within real world implementations. But if we take a look at this, on the left-hand side, you've got your data sources, and those would be landed into loading tables. And then they may go into some stage tables or views that hash the data, figure out your change hashes, and that gets loaded into your raw vault. Again, this data should be the raw data. The only changes that may have occurred to the data at this point should be things like data typing alignment. So making sure everything is in a varchar format or an integer format, or similar things like that, maybe trimming some white space off of fields. Then as you move over into your business vault, again, you might go through that satellite view layer to get your current data into your business vault. And this is where you apply those enterprise business rules. You might do some same as links to identify these customers are actually the same as these customers and things like that. And then into your end user layer, which would be your star schema, may also be some flat and wide tables, as I mentioned, and then into some potentially some OLAP cubes or tabular models, exports out to flat files, aggregates, and things like that. And then at that point, that's where your BI tools are coming into play, whatever those are. As Patrick mentioned, maybe that's Yellowfin, Power BI, Tableau, et cetera, your common things that you're very familiar with. One of the other arguments that I've heard is that there are too many tables in Data Vault. So it is quite true that there are a lot of tables generated in the Data Vault model. But what is too many? So there are disadvantages, especially from performance as well as scale, as well as also accurately tracking grain. I won't get into all the nitty-gritties of all that, but when you try to reduce the amount of tables that you're using, one of the given goals of Data Vault 2.0 is that it provides the scalability and auditability in order to provide that reliable integrated source of truth. And also that it can do that at scale at any frequency, whether that's CDC data, change data capture, whether that's streaming data, large batches, that it can consume that data at any of those rates at any latency that you need it to. And that's why it produces all these tables. So that can be accomplished, and it can track that data and be auditable. That's very important when you try to reduce the tables by following some of these other patterns where you just have, a tables like an ODS, operational data store, is just matching the source system. You lose that detail that you need to trace the data at the right grain. Also, providing that data and transforming it to be usable to the business and to the reports downstream. There are a lot of individual tables, but realistically, when you boil them down, there's really only 3 distinct patterns, 4 tables in the raw vault. Again, we mentioned hub, satellite, and link. And there's 2 more if you include the business vault, pit, and bridge. So a total of 5 altogether if you end up implementing pits and bridges. But just basics to get going, there's only 3 patterns, hub, satellite, and link. Now, there's variations and there's minutia and various things in there, but it's really the pattern is the same. So it really is pretty straightforward. And in the end, if that's a concern, really, you should be using data automation to build those tables for you regardless. Data automation is really realistically a requirement. You should be using data automation to build your data vault and your star schemas and really data warehouse patterns. These patterns have been around. They are automatable. You should be using tools so that you're not dealing with individual developers writing things differently. I'm even myself have gone back to things I've written by hand even a month or 2 later and had to spend hours trying to figure out what I was writing. But with a tool, you have consistent structure and format, how it builds everything. All right, myth, too long to implement. So again, it should be very rapid development. Typically, it's too long to implement when people are trying to do the entire data vault and warehouse in one go. It is no longer acceptable in this day and age to take 18 months to deliver a warehouse. You should be following agile processes, and you should set your scope and your scope to be just one domain of data, a few objects from a single source or 2 sources integrated together, and push that through. It should not be, you should not be sitting there and agonizing over these things for months. It should take you days or weeks. Make your decisions and fail fast. It's okay, especially with using a tool, and we'll do a demo right after this, but make your decisions, implement it, deploy it, test it, and if it's not correct, and you should have some testing involved to tell you that, go back and refactor it. Follow the standards. I've seen many people think that they have some better, more nifty ideas than the standards, and they end up pigeonholing themselves later because the standards is there to help you avoid some sticky situations you'll get into later when you don't follow the standards. And when you aren't thinking that far ahead and you think you can skip a part of the standard or have a better idea, you end up getting stuck by what that standard would have prevented you from getting involved with eventually. Focus on the model, the business model, and the terms. You'll hear taxonomy and ontology from DV2, but those are, I like to just stick with, you're going to focus on the business entities and the relationships. We can get in more details there as you get into it, but realistically, that's the focus and everything flows from there. Refactoring is incredibly easy, especially with data automation. So again, we'll show that here in just a minute. Versioning is very important. You should be following agile processes. You should be versioning your code, your models as you make these changes. And you should be leveraging data warehouse automation. There are standards, they're repeatable patterns, and they lend themselves to automation, and you should be taking advantage of that. Reduce those repetitive tasks. Let the software build all of these standardized objects for you. So I'm going to go ahead and jump out of there real quick. I'm just going to jump into Wordscape 3D. This is the tool I spend most of my time in with customers. And if you haven't seen, this is 8.6.9.1. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up, well, we'll do a couple things here. So again, rapid prototyping. I've already pulled in a source model from my North America order system baseline model. I'm going to go ahead and do that from the Asia Pacific order source. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new source. And we'll just keep the same naming convention. And I'm going to call this baseline as it's my first one. And I'm just going to quickly pull this in. I'm going to tell it not to bring views in or system tables. So I'm hitting this ODBC source. It could be JSON, XML, any of those types of sources. And I've done source discovery on a host of things, NoSQL databases, DB2, mainframe, etc. I'm just going to do a quick profiling just to show you this. I won't go through all these details. This isn't intended to be a demo, but I'm just going to show you, especially when you already know the tool. I'm not trying to train you on it. I'm just showing you as you go through and you're used to the tool, you're going to start pulling this stuff in. You should be used to whatever tools you guys are using to do your profiling, whether that's just SQL queries or what have you. But if you have a data automation tool, it should be able to do things like this for you. So that quickly, it just built this model from the source system. And this one's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of tools in here I'm not going to demo that can help identify primary keys and foreign keys for you automatically. Not the purpose of our discussion today, but it should also give the ability to run profiling and give you things like null percentages, distinct counts, and things like that very quickly. So you can kind of help identify what are your business keys, what are you looking at from your source system, and help you start making those decisions. What we're going to focus on here is Data Vault design. That's this category in this modeling tool is focused on the business focused design. Again, if you've been around data modeling, you may have heard BOM or business object model. This is kind of a hybrid between that. It's a Data Vault focused design that's business oriented. So here I'm saying I've got an orders entity. I have an employees entity, and I'm really putting this together based off of how the business views this data. And so, I've got a source from this source system feeding this data. I can just show you that real quick, trace entity source. And I can see it's coming from that connection, that source table, and loading in this business entity. I'm not going to go through all the details. This isn't a training. But just to show you real quick, identify a few things. This is where you should be spending your time, is on this business focused model. The tool, the automation tool, should be able to take that, and I'm going to call this, let's see, branch. We'll call this 0524.1. You should be able to take that information, implement the standards. And it has obviously the DB2 standards out of the box, and these can all be modified. And from here, we're just going to look at the data vault that was generated. So again, we've got 3 entities here that we're focused on. From a business perspective, you should be having these conversations with the business. about these entities. And once you do that, the tool should be able to lay out what the raw vault should look like from there. So there's definitely a few more tables here. We're looking at 8 tables now based out of those 3 tables. And we'll obviously have some tables that get generated that load that data in. And so in the end, I won't go through the process. I've already run through this before. I'll just show you in the end that this tool is going to, in the end, produce a model. We have 16 tables now, including the raw vault, and then some landing tables, which could be views. You don't necessarily need those. And then stage tables to load that data up. And that all should be tracking your data lineage. So if I do trace table source, I should see that flow path from the source all the way through and how it's making it into my raw vault. That's what we need from data automation. We need it to do the 80% of the work. We should be spending our time having the conversations with the business from this perspective here. What is an employee? What does that look like? What is an order? What is a customer? And then the rest should drive from there. And I'll come back to this in a second, but from there, we will end up actually pushing this into Snowflake. All right, so architecture, and I kind of touched on this just a second ago, but we'll continue through this. It should be a business-focused design. So again, your time should be in that model. You should be coming up with your common names for your fields. One of the things I see people do is that they go in and they name the fields based off the source system. In that business model, the names of the fields should be however the business refers to those fields. And you should have, I've had customers with 18 and more systems feeding into those single business focused entities of customer, where Scape takes care of generating all of the satellites, the hubs, the links, all the stage tables, the landing tables to feed from those 18 source systems into that one design for customer. Again, focus on those business entities and their relationships. You'll hear this referred to as taxonomies and ontologies when you're talking to data vault people. So again, we should be talking at this level, this business object level of an order. An order, customers have orders, and so they're related to each other. Orders also have products that are associated with them, and so those are related to each other. Orders have a sales rep, and that's related to the order. Sales reps have sales managers. They're related to themselves. So this is important. This can be done on a whiteboard. I've done many of these models on whiteboards. I love whiteboards. I also love, and you'll see this later, I love Windows with Expo markers. It's wonderful. A great tool for starting out. Your raw vault should be directly derived from that business model. Just like you saw, the tool took this model and generated the raw vault design. There's no reason you should be building all of those entities by hand. Technical success does not necessarily mean a business success. If you haven't done your work over in this area well, and it doesn't match how the business views the business, how the managers, those people that are the CIOs, the CEOs that are looking at these reports, if it has not been modeled for the business, you can technically get the data over there. But if you haven't actually modeled it for the business, you've kicked the can down the road as far as that analysis that needs to be done. You're putting all that work on these report developers to put it all back together and say, oh, what is a product? What's the sales rep? How do I define these things? They're also building these metrics by hand again and again. And that's how we get all these different answers. The frustration of the executive team looking at these reports with different numbers from different people. I've been in a situation where I've brought numbers to a meeting, 3 other people bring the same number to the meeting, the same metric, but all different values. And I was able to go back and say, no, I've got a warehouse with definitions. I've got a data vault that is supplying this data. This is the version of the truth. And that is part of, overcoming that resistance to change we'll talk about later, able to establish the data vault as that system of truth. And the executive team telling everybody else to no longer bring those metrics because it needed to come from the data warehouse at that point. Team skills. Which skills or experience are necessary? So one of the first things is soft skills. So Jennifer Stroop at WWDC brought this up. I believe also Heli Heskaho brought it up as well. Heli from Finland. Soft skills are incredibly important. You can have a completely technical team, but if they don't have soft skills, they don't have the ability to talk to the business, then you're still going to run into problems. And I'm sure you've seen that. But the first day of the Data Vault conference this year was focused on the business aspect because it's incredibly important. Communication, time management. I just ran through these. And honestly, I was kind of surprised by the list. Some things I had to go back and say, oh, I need to think about these things. And so definitely organization, teamwork, all these things. Also business acumen. Don't miss that on your teams when you're building a data vault. You need people that understand the business, that can have that hybrid role between the technical implementers, practitioners, as well as the business, and have an understanding of the business in between. Technical aptitude, absolutely important. You do need people with technical aptitude. They need to be able to understand and implement, and those things can be tested. Soft skills, you'll see a link down there at the bottom talking about how you can test for soft skills. Definitely, I think one of those things that's missing a lot of times when putting teams together. Passion. This is something you just have to look for, and not everybody has it. I have worked on teams where I've come in and over the course of several months with 125 tasks to complete, and I've completed over 100 of them, and the other several people on the team, 3 or 4 people, only completed the remaining balance of those. So part of it's passion, and that's something you have to look for and understand. You need at least somebody in there that's passionate about it. And when you get a team of people that are passionate, it's wonderful. We used to have a saying on that 12-person team that we would get in meetings and argue, and we would tell our managers we came to violent agreement on what to do. Doesn't mean everybody got their way, but we argued it out, hashed it out. In the end, a decision was made, and we all agreed, and we're happy that a decision was made, even if it wasn't. Sometimes we won, sometimes we lost, but we're gracious about that, and we have a violent agreement. That's what we're going to do, and everybody's going to agree. It's not going to be changed later, and that's a part of that is passion for doing things well. And then obviously DV2 training. Again, we've talked about the training before, but team skills, you definitely need to have some Data Vault 2.0 experience on the team. Not everybody needs to be CDVB2 certified. Definitely helps, but as long as you have some people with that certification as well as experience, certification by itself doesn't necessarily lead to, if somebody doesn't have any experience, but they've gone through, that's definitely going to help. But having an experienced implementation, and we'll talk about as well failing fast, or we did talk about failing fast, that is important as well. So, and again, we'll talk about tools here, and then we'll jump back into just a show and tell and make sure we have some time here at the end. The design of your raw vault is essential to, I didn't change that tagline. Let's talk about tools. What tools do you need? So data modeling, Expo markers, like I talked about, whiteboard, a window, and Expo markers. Just go for it. Start modeling from the business object model. Look up business object model if you need to. That's incredibly important. And I was just looking around my left and right. I've got the book sitting here somewhere. Agile Data Warehouse Design is one of them. But if you need some help in understanding that. But again, Data Vault training will also teach you that as well. You've got PowerPoint as another tool. If you already have that, that's a fine tool for at least doing the high level. ER Studio, which also integrates with Warescape 3D. You can do your modeling as well there and push that in. Warescape 3D also, as you saw, does profiling, discovery, modeling, and automation as well. Data profiling, again, SQL queries, Excel. You can hook Excel up to Azure ADLS2. You can hook it up to web APIs to pull in data and do profiling on as well. Also already showed you Wordscape 3D. And then data automation. You definitely need data automation. Whatever tool you choose for data automation is going to give you a step up. And it definitely needs to show you data lineage, have scheduler involved. And let's see, we'll come back to the demo because we're running a little short on time, but I'll show, let's talk through resistance to change. How do you overcome the cultural resistance to a new methodology? So definitely run into this quite a few times, whether from the business or from a technical perspective. It really comes to understanding. Remember, one of the big things about Data Vault is don't sell Data Vault. You're selling auditability, an integration platform. You need to focus on the business value that's being produced. This model is focused, Data Vault is focused on modeling to meet the business needs. It's that integrated data layer, business concept focused, it's standards based. They need to consider employee turnover. These standards, by having people follow Data Vault 2.0, when you bring people in that know Data Vault 2.0, or you're going to train them up, that's great, but there's a standard. There's not going to be a question. I've run into so many situations over the years, especially consultants that will come in and say, oh, that was all done wrong. We need to redo it. If you follow the Data Vault 2.0 standard and you bring new people in and they're going to follow the Data Vault 2.0 standard, you don't have this big turnover and argument about the implementation and the standards and the architecture. It's a standard, you're set. There is durability in this model due to business-focused design. Over time, this model will be durable as you bring in acquisitions, new source systems, new applications that you need to bring data in, whether that's commodity data or enterprise data. It can be integrated into this model because it's been designed for the business, not based off the source systems. And it has the ability to adapt with the business changes over time because the soft business rules, those business rules that may change, are done after the raw vault on the way into the InfoMart. And so if you change them, you can actually reload all history over time. In a real world example here, I worked for a large telecommunications company, and they implemented a organizational structure change to how their numbers rolled up, public-facing company. And they wanted to change that whole reporting structure. Well, they made that change, and it messed up the revenue reporting metrics to the public. And actually, this stock price took a hit due to it. And within 2 months, and it took them 3 months to finally roll it back, they rolled back to the original sales organizational structure because the stock price took such a hit there. Now, if they were using Data Vault 2.0 and they wanted to change that org structure or test it, what they could do is implement that hierarchical change in the sales organizational structure and the reporting metrics in a test InfoMart, a test dimension, and run it across all historical data in the Data Vault, and actually be able to prove out those numbers and looked at how they would have rolled up before ever implementing it, and avoided the whole fiasco in the first place. If you build it, they will come. Field of Dreams. I had to throw a quote in there. One of the other things too is just build it. Don't sell it. If you have the bandwidth, if you've given the autonomy to do so, it's not something that you have to go out and broadcast. You just build the Data Vault. You do your job and do the right thing by building a Data Vault 2.0 implementation, build the star schema, prototype one domain of data and 2 sources to integrate at the most. And then in the end, provide a star schema as the output. It's for your first project. That'll give that familiarity to the business. And if you can, also demo a change to the soft business rules, reprocessing it against the historical data so they can actually see that you have the ability to show both what it was and what it could be in the future, or what it is now after you made the change. And you have the ability to compare both. One of the big things there, we talked about data lineage, and bring that real quick. I'm going to leave time for some questions at the end here, but let me pull this up real quick. I don't know if there's any questions yet, Patrick, but you can start throwing some at me while I'm pulling this up.
Yeah, there have been a few I've been able to answer as we go along. I actually had 20, which is a very, very good number. I appreciate that. So let me remind you that there's a Q&A button at the bottom. So one question I wasn't quite sure enough to answer, in Data Vault model, where would CDC get implemented? The raw vault or somewhere else?
CDC is implemented upstream. So that's how you get the data landed. Again, CDC, change data capture, is capturing those changes from your source systems and landing it into whatever environment you need to be able to consume it. So if we take a look, I've pulled up WhereScape Red 10. This is the actual tool that builds the objects when deployed from 3D. So I've pulled this through. But if we were to take a look at diagram here, and let's see here. Well, let's look at data architecture overview. So here you can see your data sources and your loading here. And if we're to take a look at that, it's really this area here where you would implement. So some of my customers use Oracle Golden Gate or other tools to land that data, Fivetran or things like that, to load that data into your target environment. So let's say it's Snowflake. A lot of customers are getting their data already landed into Snowflake for them from a CDC tool or a streaming tool. In that case, we just change the automation that WhereScape produces to, instead of creating these load tables because they're already there, it creates this view layer and it just picks up that CDC data from there into the data vault.
Now, what Red does support is something like a high watermark, where if you've got a date or a serial key or a order number on something that's built into Red, we can modify the query that's pulling the data in to only pull data in after some high watermark.
Yes, absolutely. So high watermarks absolutely supported, and that can be from whatever system you're pulling from. Lots of different ways to implement that globally, set domain of data per table. A lot of options there. A lot of customers have done a lot of variations. So WhereScape does support that out of the box. But if you're looking for true CDC or true streaming data, that's going to get landed into some target. It might be into a data lake, ADLS2, S3 buckets, et cetera, and then WhereScape could pull it in from there. One of the important things also with doing a data automation is that you get your impact analysis. So if I do a track back diagram here, super important that you can, then this all gets generated in documentation, but that you have that lineage, and that you can also jump through here. If I need to go make a change here on this particular stage table, I can jump directly to that. Also, you hear a lot about column aware, automation, and that's been in the tool from just about day one. Let's take region, for example. If I am looking at my data in demo employees, and I want to look at this, and by the way, this is all up on Snowflake, and these repositories are hosted on Azure Postgres as a service. Here I'm looking at region, I see this not applicable being thrown into this value, and I'm like, where's that coming from? I can go back to my columns here, right click on region, and I can track that back and see this full track back of that column and where it came from originally. And I can also see where it's getting transformed along the way. And if I need to go look at that, I can jump to that directly in the tool. So now I'm actually on there and I can go look at that transformation and work on it from there. So, full visibility there. All right, what other questions?
I think I can answer this one, but I'll let you answer it. Do you also support other business entities like status tracking and effective satellites?
Yep, absolutely. Those are in the tool in WhereScape 3D, and that's part of really just your attribution. So in the business focus model, again, if we were going to be doing status tracking or effectivity satellites or what have you, then that's really part of just this attribution when you're in the tool marking your attributes and what they are in the data vault nomenclature.
Okay, and then lastly, how do you do the mapping and translations if needed between layers in the data ecosystem? I wasn't quite sure what data ecosystem was.
Okay, so there are lots of different places. So for instance, hard business rules and soft business rules. So those transformations, Data Vault specifies where those should occur. If you have, for instance, for the Data Vault shop has produced several add-ins that kind of bring that level up in the tool set. And I'll just show you this real quick here. For instance, if I'm looking at this particular model here, I'm using a pattern for naming my keys in the system. And when following this pattern, you've probably heard of, if you've been doing Data Vault, you'll hear of business key collision codes, BKCC. So we have produced a option in here. If I take this model and using this pattern and I do an advanced copy back into the same model, and I'm just going to call this test for simplicity here. I'm going to apply the Data Vault Shop custom model conversion, DVS for short, and run that. And what it's going to do is add all of the BKCC values. So see that again, this is the automation tool at work. Any kind of customization you want to do, that's Data Vault Shop does that for customers. Where we added custom BKCC automation, you can see it's added data transformations here. What does that do? So if we look at the details, what it's done is taken your business model, it's added a business key collision code to every business key. And also if we take a look at what did it do with that, if you haven't defined your value for your business key collision code, we have that set at the connection level and it will automatically add the data transformation. Now, if you haven't set it, if you're just using the default, we throw a comment in here to say this was set by the connection level business key collision code, because we want in the code for everybody to see that this was done by default. Somebody didn't take the time to specifically create that transformation, because you really should be evaluating your business key collision code per entity. But if you didn't, the tool will take a default that you've set at the connection level. Also, by the way, we have an add-in that adds hard business rules to the stage layer automatically. And soft business rules, it will automatically add to the satellite views on the egress, the querying out from the raw vault. It will add the soft business rules to those satellite views. And when you create PID tables, it will automatically add those metrics into the PID table, so they're already pre-cached into the PID table for you. All right, any other questions on that?
There's been a few that have popped up, which is good. That's very, very engaging. That means you're explaining things well and enticing people's interest. So we're coming up right on an hour. That is perfect timing.
Awesome.
Let me answer one last question. Very simple. Yes. So let me steal back the screen. I will show you one last slide. A lot of questions coming up. A lot of people say, can you do X? Can you do Y? Can you do Z? How do you do this? We'd love to talk with you. If you you can email us at moreinfo@warescape.com. You can certainly go to warescape.com. There's a couple of buttons there. Contact us or request a demo. We'd love to talk with you about what specific requirements you have, what specific needs you have, and show you what Warescape can do. Warescape, as I said, has been around as long as Data Vault's been around. I think we've been supporting Data Vault since 2.0, since it came out in 2013. We have some massive, massive stories of, I think, the world's largest Data Vault. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's a Micron, and that was a migration from Teradata to Snowflake that was done in, what did Kent say, 6 months, 9 months instead of 18 months like they were planning. It's an amazing tool. It's a great tool for increasing productivity. Kevin, hey, thank you very, very much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
There's still a couple of questions popping up. If you want to keep asking questions, that's fine. I'll email you back. Fantastic presentation. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for attending. And expect to see some follow-up emails from us. Feel free to respond to those if you need any more information. Kevin, once again, thank you. Very nice job.
Thank you.